The Honey Island Swamp Monster. Weighing upwards of 500 pounds, covered in long, matted swamp flotsam mixed hair, and smelling of death, this strange cryptid, although similar to the Sasquatch in appearance, carries with it two distinctions: 3 to 4 toed tracks, and what some might say is a sinister aura. The creature was first spotted in 1974 by a man named Harlan Ford. Harlan Ford and his friend Buddy Mills were in the deep woods of the Louisiana swamp looking for an old abandoned camp. As the two hunters were on foot and making their way through the swamp, they were traveling to where Harlan first thought he had seen the camp, when they broke out into a clearing and stopped. In front of them was a massive creature on all fours. Billy asked out loud, "What is that thing?" The creature heard him and stood to face the two men. After a few seconds of eye contact, it took off into the woods. With rifles in hand, Harlan and Billy ran to try to get another look at it, but instead they found its tracks. Upon arriving back home, Harlan told his family about the encounter. In his words, he said, "It was nothing like I'd ever seen before, ugly and sinister, and looking like something out of a horror movie. It swung around and looked at us for a moment, then tore off into the swamp. I want you to know it scared the heck out of me." Harlan described the creature as 7 feet tall, its legs slender, but its chest and shoulders huge, and it had long grayish hair on its head and short, dingy gray hair on its body. He noted that it also had unusual eyes, very large and amber-colored, and looked hard at them before it ran off. Mr. Ford was an honest man and didn't care if people believed him or not. He wasn't interested in fame or fortune. Still, in 1974, Harlan and Billy were back in the swamp on a duck hunt. They stumbled across a large dead boar with its throat torn out. Its stench and smell told them that it had been dead for a day or two. Further on up the bayou, they found another dead boar with the same kind of wounds. Harlan thought it might have been gators doing the killing, but the boars were too far up on land from the pond. They wondered why anyone would just leave them there to rot. After a while, they came onto a pond stretched across a few acres. From behind the brush, they saw ripples in the pond and thought it was ducks, so they got down and crawled to get a better shot. When they looked up, they saw another large boar lying at the edge of the pond. It had a large gash in its throat and blood was spilling out into the water. Harlan and Bill saw tracks near the boar just like the ones they had seen back in 1963. They decided not to stay around in case the creatures came back to its fresh kill. Later on that night, Harlan and Billy decided to return, but first they brought plaster to cast the tracks. When they got back, the boar was still there, now covered with flies. The tracks were there too, so they poured plaster in. With tracks firmly in hand, Harlan contacted the Louisiana Wildlife Commission and zoologists at the Louisiana State University. All who examined the casts had determined they were not a hoax and were made by an unidentifiable animal. The weight of the creature due to the tracks was estimated at about 400 pounds. Harlan, on later trips into the swamp, cast several more tracks and continued to look for the creature. But this is where Harlan's story ends and another begins. Ted Williams lived on the bayou most of his life. He was a trapper and worked on the swampland every day. Ted claimed to have seen the creature many times, and he knew that there was more than just one of them. He said, "I could have killed them, but I didn't, because they didn't seem to want to harm me. I'd see them swimming the river and getting out on the bank, and then just disappear into the swamp. One day while fishing, one crossed the river and walked right past him. Ted took his boat deep in the swamp to set trout lines. He was never seen again. No one has ever found him or his boat." One of the strangest legends surrounding the Honey Island Swamp Monster revolves around a train wreck, which allegedly occurred near the Pearl River in the early part of the 20th century. According to the legend, the train was full of exotic animals from a traveling circus, which fled into the swamps after the train derailed. While most of the creatures would soon perish in the harsh swampland, the legend goes on to tell us that a troop of chimpanzees managed to survive and even went as far as to interbreed with alligators. The result was a strange colony of reptilian-like mammals. However, this is impossible because monkeys and alligators cannot interbreed. Legends, conjecture, and sporadic sightings of the creatures still pop up to this day in the swamps of Louisiana, but for now, the beast is sitting and waiting in the unknown files.